everybody. Welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed, the live television edition. And if you're watching us live, it is, of course, Wednesday, September 4th, 2013, coming to you from the MPTS studio. Of course, broadcasting on MPTS as well as IPMNation.com/MCUTV. And, of course, if you're on IPMNation.com on the MCU TV page, you can see that we do have a live chat room if you'd like to participate in the show that way. Also, the phone number to call as well as the phone number to text. If you would like to communicate with us and join the conversation, you have multiple options here on Matt Connarton Unleashed. And we'll do some, we got some interesting stuff to talk about, and we'll do a little housekeeping, so to speak, too. A couple of things I want to mention. But Mel, you had a couple of things. We'll hit that right at the top.
I get to go first?
Yes.
Oh, well, Matt.
Sort of. I mean, I talked for a moment.
You did. Yeah, you're more important than me. It's true. Yeah, there's a couple things I want to mention. First of all, on October 6th, I am going to be doing the NAMI walk, and NAMI is the National Alliance for Mental Illness. I don't know if it's alliance or association, but they're the people that advocate for mental health and stronger mental health system, and I'm going to be walking for them. So I never ask for donations for stuff, but I'm asking for donations for this. So if you care about, better mental health system and less stigma against people who are mentally ill, please, 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 please donate. See, I'm begging, please, please, please. You can go to NAMI Walks, that's NAMI walks.nami.org/littlemel. So namiwalks.nami.org/littlemel. Or email me at littlemel@ipmnation.com, and I can send you the link. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is I was, and you've had him on the show, I was helping out Ross Terrio today. And
a great man.
Yes, definitely. I was doing some sign waving for him. We basically stood on a street corner waving at people, and nobody swore at us. It was surprising, because he's like, you got to bring a thick skin, and people might beep at you. But Ross. Sorry, I was with someone else named Rich today, and apparently if your name has the same letter, I'll confuse you.
They're common names.
Yes, it's true. So Ross is running in a special election on September 17th for state rep for Ward 7 in Manchester. And I just want to give him a plug because he's Republican. He's more moderate, though. He's not super far right. And there are things we disagree on, there are things we agree on, but what I liked about him is, first, he's very, very personable. A lot of people that I found that I meet, they're kind of like standoffish and, very like, I'm super conservative and I'm a politician, but, he's very easygoing, very easy to talk to, joking around, and his big thing is he will represent people, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't matter, and he's really good with returning people's phone calls. If you call him, email him, he will, return it, so I definitely want to plug him, and I can't vote in Manchester unless I commit voter fraud, but if I did, I would vote for Ross.
Now, according to Steve Valancourt, Ross is vile. He calls him the vile Ross Terrio.
And Manchester's biggest loser.
That's right.
I would vote for Manchester's biggest loser.
Steve
and you should too.
Steve Valancourt's a mean man.
He is.
Well, speaking of Ross, Ross was a guest back in the early days of rock, paper, hand grenades, the early days, so to speak. Gary and I, of course, we do rock, paper, hand grenades Wednesday night at 6 here at MPTS, right after Norm and Friends, and we had Ross Terrio on the show. And Ross, at the time, was running for re-election for New Hampshire State Legislature. He was pursuing another term and lost the election, and then blamed Gary and I. And
he actually mentioned that to me today.
Yes. He blames Gary.
And now you guys recently ruined somebody else's.
We did, in fact, yes. Bill O'Brien. Who is difficult to Google, by the way. If you try to Google Bill O'Brien's a very common name. There's some coach at a college football team also named Bill O'Brien.
I think I have to do William O'Brien. Right?
Yeah, I ended up having to do that. And even that, it was actually difficult. But William O'Brien, former House Speaker of the New Hampshire State Legislature, was on Was it last week or the week before on this show?
I believe it was last week.
I mean, not this show, I'm sorry. He was booked for this show. He was on Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades with Gary and I.
Yeah, it was either last week or the week before.
And he was supposed to come. Mel had booked him to be on this show, but he has now rescinded his appearance, his agreement to appear on this show because he is now not running. He's decided not to run for the United States Congress. And my theory is that Gary and I, just as we did to Ross, although hopefully Ross will have a resurgence, and we certainly support him here, but it's our belief that Gary and I had ruined another promising political career, and that it's because of us that Bill O'Brien is now not running for Congress. So you can be upset with us, or you can thank us, depending on your point of view. But he did appear on Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades and then decided he's not running. So.
Maybe this is like a future career for you. Maybe people can start hiring you to like ruin the political careers of opponents and everything, and they can pay you for everyone that you ruin.
Maybe. Or I could just be a supervillain called the Ruiner.
Ooh, would you have a costume?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that sounds nice. I think you should do that. Let's get on that.
Yeah.
Find a designer and stuff.
Shouldn't be that hard.
Yeah, like a big red R and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
I'll be the Ruiner, and I'll just ruin things for people.
I like that.
Some people feel that this show ruins MPTS.
Well, you are an embarrassment to
I'm
the
a disgrace and an embarrassment, according to Glenn R.J. Willett. Ginger hates me. Tom Ford. And so we'll address Tom Ford briefly, too. That's the other little bit of housekeeping. So believe me, I'm bored with the whole thing, so I'm not going to spend much time on this at all. But he did say something last week on what he claims will be his last ever address regarding any of this. Because, you know, he has his ongoing war with Amsterdam, and of course I'm on Team Amsterdam. They're an important part of IPM Nation, and I consider them good friends as well, more importantly. And I do support Joel Elber's run for Ward 12 School Board.
Saw him campaigning this morning.
Yes. Yeah, he's out there hitting the pavement. But Tom did address me. I think he referred to me as that guy.
Yep.
And this time... you know, and you can go back and watch this stuff. I don't want to rehash it, but he did say, he responded to a comment that I made about how apparently at one time Tom assumed that Norm and I were life partners because, you know, I do Norm and Friends with Norm 4 to 6 on Wednesdays, and I guess in Tom's mind he just assumed that must mean I'm also gay, and I commented that I think that says something interesting, that Tom would make that assumption.
Which, by the way...
Something interesting about Tom.
I just want to point out that I was actually telling Ross that story, and he said that you could do much better than Norm.
Yes, well...
But you'd only go after one guy, though, if you weren't
right,
straight.
Right,
Yeah.
I'm not gay, just to set the record, and regular viewers of this show know, or if you watch Norm and Friends, you've heard me address it, that I'm not gay.
It's very manly,
Yep,
straight.
I'm purely heterosexual. However, if I were gay, if in some alternate universe there were a gay version of me, or if I somehow, someday just decided to be gay.
Because you can choose.
Right, because
Yeah.
a lot of conservative Christians, of course, believe it's a lifestyle choice. You don't, you know, it's not a matter of biology or genetics. You choose to be gay. So if they were correct, which they're not, but if they were, and I were able to choose to be gay, and I were someday gay, I would only have eyes for one man. And that man, of course, is Glenn R.J. Willett. Because I'm secure enough in my heterosexuality to recognize that he is a truly sexy beast. Were sexiness a fluid, it would ooze from his pores, which is why he should be the next mayor, the people's mayor of Manchester. Glenn, don't get upset with me if you're watching. I've paid you a compliment. And you know I'm kidding.
I liked your disclaimer.
Yeah, I don't really want him to be mayor. I'm just kidding. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I mean about the other thing. No, but anyway, so Tom responded to my comment saying, well, that says something interesting about Tom, that he would just assume that. And he talked about how, you know, having gay friends, his family having, I don't know, he may have a gay family member or something, and making it clear that I think he took it as I was calling him a bigot or homophobic or something. The truth is, and this is God's honest truth, I was sort of half kidding when I made the comment that, well, that says something interesting about Tom or whatever. I don't really, and I never really did think that Tom was a bigot. You know, Tom and I sort of have this back and forth. We barely have ever spoken in person, but, you know, we kind of volley back and forth on the air. His real beef is with Amsterdam. I'm just sort of a periphery. I always have trouble with that word. I'm on the periphery of that. But in all honesty, Tom has never said anything or done anything on the air to indicate to me that he's bigoted in any way or homophobic or any of that. So I was sort of poking at him with that comment. I mean, it is interesting that he would assume that. Maybe there's something about me that just seems gay to him. I don't know. But Tom, if you're getting any ideas, I've already said I would, if I were hypothetically, theoretically gay, only have eyes for one man. And that would not be you, Tom Ford.
I bet it's your hair. You have...
Probably. I have gay hair.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
So I apologize, Tom, if my homosexual hair confused you in some way.
You probably come off as like a bear, too. With
right.
The
well, I am
chest.
extremely hairy,
yeah.
yes. I'm extremely hairy, Tom Ford, as I suspect you are as well. So perhaps we're birds of a feather, so to speak, or
there's a kinship there.
Yes,
a
yes.
hairy kinship.
Yes, absolutely. But just to clarify, I mean, I didn't really think that you were a bigot. So, and the rest of it, whatever. I mean, I'm kind of, like I said, I'm kind of bored with the whole thing. Although I do enjoy, I will admit, I do enjoy listening to the guys on Amsterdam rip on you. I think it's pretty entertaining. But I enjoy your responses as well. You know, that's about as close to being neutral as I can get with that. Anyway, so we have, in lieu of having a guest, because we don't have a guest here with us, it's just Mel and I this week. So I usually try to find things to rant about, and hopefully in the process I'll upset some people, because
Well, you're the ruiner.
I am the ruiner, yes. So this is something that I just found out about today. There's a gentleman named Jason Rapert. I assume that's how you say it.
It's the most unfortunate name ever.
It is, yes. His last name is spelled R-A-P-E-R-T. So it's definitely not Rappert, because that would be with two P's. So I guess his name is Rapert. So we will assume that is how you pronounce his name. Maybe it's French, maybe it's Repair. I don't know. But this came to my attention today. This is from Salon.com. Katie McDonough wrote this. The headline is, Republican lawmaker says he serves God, not his constituents. Yeah, you all already know where this is going. I'll read this to you quickly. It's actually a very short article. State Senator Jason Rapert, the man behind Arkansas's ban on abortion at 12 weeks, may have been elected to office to serve the 85,000 constituents in his district. But, he says, he only really serves God. He told an audience at the Faith to Action banquet in Columbus, Ohio, quote, "It's more important to do what is right by God than it is to please those that would rather have me talk about pro-life but not really do much about pro-life," unquote. Oh, and then he goes on. He says, quote, "There's only one voice that matters, and that's when I stand before the Lord at the judgment seat," unquote. He then went on to remark that the men and women who protested Texas's sweeping new abortion restrictions at the state capitol are basically demons from hell. He said, quote, "I've never had a glimpse of hell or heard a real demon, but I believe that must be what they sound like. It's spiritual warfare," unquote. I almost don't want to say anything right away and just kind of let all that hang in the air for a moment. Let's give it about 10 or 12 seconds. Yeah, did all that sink in? So, now he is from Arkansas. I don't know if we have any viewers in the South watching us online. I don't know if they have internet there.
Oh, I hope they do.
Or the internets.
I hope they're listening.
Well, maybe. You never know. So, regular viewers of this program, or listeners of mine, probably, and I hate to seem predictable, but you probably know what's going to happen next. Yes, I am going to verbally savage this man and mercilessly make fun of him. But here's what you might not know. I'm actually going to do it in a couple of different ways. There's the obvious way, and then there's another layer to this that you might not have thought of or suspected. Or you might have. But regardless, I'm a separation of church and state guy. I don't consider myself an atheist. I'm sort of quasi-agnostic. Because of some experiences that I've had personally in my life that I can't fully explain using logic or science or whatnot, I keep an open mind. I'm very open to the idea that there may be something else. Norm calls it the universal spirit. Some, obviously most in this country, call it God. I'm very open to these ideas. Do I believe that there is literally an invisible man in the sky? No, and frankly, I think that's silly. But I am open to the idea that there may be something or someone or some other plane of existence that we don't visibly see here, and so forth. So I'm not an atheist, and for those who don't know, because not everyone does, an atheist is someone who says, I don't believe in God. An agnostic doesn't particularly believe, but is at least open to the possibility, kind of leaves the door open. Or as I like to think of it, an atheist says definitely not, an agnostic says probably not. I won't even say probably not. My version of agnosticism says, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it all pans out. Christians don't like that because they believe, of course, if you don't fully accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, then you're going to hell. Of course, the logic of that breaks down pretty quickly when you consider that there are very large populations on planet Earth that are never even exposed to the concept of Jesus in any way. Are all those people damned to hell, even if by no fault of their own, they're never exposed in any way to the word of Christ? It doesn't make sense, which is probably why the Pope now says even atheists are redeemed for their if they do good works. In other words, you can not necessarily believe but still be a good person and you're okay. The Pope said that. So I'm not sure why I went off on that tangent of explaining that aspect of this, but basically I'm a big separation of church and state guy. And by the way, so are a lot of Christians. I know lots of Christians who believe in separation of church and state. It's not like it's just something that us evil agnostics or atheists run around thinking about. I mean, we've had John Heichel on the show. In fact, the very first edition of Matt Connarton Unleashed television edition that we did here at MPTS, John Heichel, a Republican, a Catholic, says he believes in separation of church and state. And we have a call. And they hung up. Maybe it was Mrs. X and she realized that she had to go smoke some more crack first. If you don't know what I'm referring to, check out last week's show. We determined that Mrs. X is she not only smokes but sells crack. So I'm a big separation of church and state guy. So I find people like this, Mr. Rapert, incredibly dangerous. And anyone who voted for him should be furious because he should represent the people. Leave the representing God to clergy, priests and reverends and rabbis and whomever. I mean, God did not elect this man. I know some people, I remember George W. Bush was quoted as saying crazy stuff like, I believe God wants me to do this or whatever. Michelle Bachmann, of course, says all kinds of crazy things. Leave God out of it. There's almost, I've always felt, and this is going to really upset some people, but I've always felt that this idea that the United States is special in terms of, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we're not. I am. I know I don't sound it sometimes to some people. Right-wing conservatives probably don't believe this about me. But this is true. I consider myself to be very patriotic. I love this country. I think there's a lot wrong with it, which is why I criticize it, which is something a lot of people don't get. Some people think if you criticize your country in any way, that means you don't love your country. That means you're a commie or something. They don't understand that people like me criticize the country because we love it. I use the analogy of, I don't have any children myself, but I know enough to understand that if you have a child and your child behaves in a manner that you don't approve of or want your child behaving in, you have to address that. You have to discipline your child. You don't just let your child run roughshod because you're afraid that if you address any behavioral issues with your child, that means you don't love your kid, right? I love this country, and I do think we're special. I think the United States of America is the greatest country on earth, and there is nowhere else I would rather live. Okay? But I've always found it a little bit creepy, for lack of a better word, the idea that we're somehow special in the eyes of God. I know Christian conservatives like to believe this. You know, we're a Christian nation. By the way, I don't have any problem with saying that we're a Christian nation. I don't believe that Christianity should be foisted upon the people or should be the official religion of the country. But I don't have a problem with that phrase only because, statistically speaking, it is correct. Statistically, this is a Christian nation. We have more Christians than anything else. So that's fine. But this idea that God somehow specially blessed the United States or that we're his favorite or something, not that I hear Christian conservatives use those words exactly, but that seems to be the idea, that the United States is somehow special. And I think Christian conservatives often use that thinking, that mode of thinking, in terms of the idea that legislators ultimately serve God first and the people second. And I'm just saying, that's not the gig. God does not choose you. You can think you're somehow special and God chose you. But there's something just weirdly, I almost don't want to use the word, but I can't think of a better one. There's something weirdly arrogant to me about that. Whether it's in the macro, believing that we're special to God as a country, or individuals who believe that God chose them to serve office, to be a politician. What a weird profession for God to choose something to do, to be a politician. Hi, welcome to Matt Connarton Unleashed. Who's on the line?
Hey, Matt, it's David. How you doing?
Good, David. How are you? Is this the David?
Oh, it's the David.
David Grover?
Yes, sir. How you been, brother?
Good. How are you? I haven't talked to you in, it's been a few months anyway.
Yeah, I was out and about. I was at Valley Total Fitness.
Yeah, actually, you did call the show once before, but the line was breaking up and we couldn't hear you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that? But it sounds like you've got a good connection. Now, you are, as I understand, a Christian, so I assume you have a counter-argument for me. Just don't swear.
I wanted to mention, because you were just talking about how conservative American Christians like to pretend or think that they're like closer to God than most people, and or most nations, and it goes back to the Old Testament verses that refer to Abraham and like the oncoming Israeli nation as a people, and it says, "Blessed are those that." It pretty much says, "Blessed are those that are the friends of the chosen people," quote unquote, the Jews. So, blessed are those that are friends or like that help the Jews out, and anybody else is pretty much. It's like, yeah, you're effed if you don't. And you're blessed if you do. So Americans think that because we give all this foreign aid and we do. Like America is like Israel's big brother with all the bigger guns.
Oh, absolutely.
In the military.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I didn't know that. So that's where that comes from.
Yeah, that's like one of those main things. And again, like you were saying, we're a Christian nation, even though we're so far from a Christian nation, it's painful. But yeah, that's why a lot of Christians, especially pastors, they preach that in church and stuff. Like literally,
right? Oh yeah.
On the pulpit, they'll preach that because of us, how much we love the Jews and how much we help Israel, the state of Israel, which is really just land we stole from Palestinians and gave to a group of people who didn't even live there anymore.
Right.
Which is like that blows my mind. The whole like Israeli state after the 10 Days War, or the 7 Days War, whatever it was. Where America pretty much who had nothing to do with anything. And I mean, I guess it's like the whole UN, the whole cult, like the as like a council or whatever, but we literally showed up to Palestine. We're like, you know that river that runs through your country? And the Palestinians are all like, yeah, 'cause they're all broke and they have rocks. Like, yeah, we know, yeah. They're like, all right, so we're going to take everything from there to the Mediterranean, and we're just going to take it, and we're going to give it to your sworn enemies. And we're going to build a fence between it, and you can't do anything about it, because if you do, we're going to send the Americans to come mess you up. Oh, yeah, and then we're going to give more money for military aid to Israel than any other country in history.
Yeah.
And then you guys can pretty much pound sand for the rest of your life. And
Yeah.
if you have a problem with the land, the holy land that they took, too, it's not even just, like, ground. Like, if someone was, like, to tell America, you lost Nebraska, there wouldn't be much stuff. People wouldn't care. But you want to take... Yeah, you want to take like Pennsylvania or someplace where we have historical things that ground us as Americans.
Yeah.
Like in Palestine, like the Dock and the Wailing Wall and stuff that goes back thousands of years in these people's culture, and you just take it away from them and expect. And that's why in America, which is crazy, is how much we're all the poor Jews, and like you can't even say. You can't say anything bad about the Jews, period. If you want to make it anywhere in life, you can't say anything bad about Jews. Like, look at Mel Gibson. He said one thing. People, like, they crucified him. Well, I guess he said a few things, and he is a little crazy, but, I mean, you can't say anything about the Jews.
Well, politically...
And they literally just run Palestine into the wall, and there's nothing anybody says or does about it. And people on this side of the world still looking like those gosh darn Palestinians in their rocks. We're like, they literally have campaigns in Israel where they take bulletproof bulldozers, go into parts of Palestine that they decide that they're going to take, and they literally just plow houses over.
Well, I've seen the footage, yeah.
Yeah, it's unbelievable,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And we as Americans will stand behind Jerusalem as a country no matter what they do. And God knows what's really going on in Syria right now, you know what I mean? Like, America, we showed up in the middle, whatever, just for a quote-unquote weapons of mass destruction, and then all of a sudden we're tiptoeing into Iraq, and then we're killing Saddam Hussein. We're still over there. Now Syria's got problems. We're gonna go military strike one of Israel's arch enemies. Like, this is all, like, it just seems a little too convenient. I mean, like, I'm no conspiracy theorist, but every time $1 million changes hands, a Jew is making money somewhere.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's funny because you mentioned, you brought up Mel Gibson, which is a pretty extreme example. He went off on kind of a hateful rant, but I was going to say politically, though, if you're serving or even running for federal office, if you say anything that's even remotely, even the most constructive criticism possible of anything Israel does in terms of foreign policy or how they react to threats or anything, you're immediately tagged as an anti-Semite. You could make a casual remark about Israel's foreign policy that's just even mildly critical, maybe they should tone down the rhetoric or whatever, or criticize how they defend themselves against Hezbollah or whomever, and then immediately someone's on you calling you an anti-Semite if you're a politician.
Yeah, exactly. And that is like, it's almost like that weird, crazy racism, like this. It's like the elephant in the room that nobody talks about, but there's obviously controlling so much, and people just pretend like it's. I'm not, again, like, I'm no conspiracy theorist. I'm not rolling around with like tinfoil on my head, but if you really break it down, all of the major newspapers, all of the major corporations, like, if you really, the United States is no longer the democracy that we were founded on. It's an oligarchy at this point. Like, I can't remember. There's like some political writer. He wrote that it's blindfolded imperialism is like what the United States turned into. It's just like imperialism. Then the people it's under the guise of like this democracy where we're picking. But in all honesty, we're one choice away from communism. Like, we always, like, America's always like, oh, the Reds, those commies, we're one choice. We're a bipartisan system. We're one choice away from communism. Like, there's really, America's run by an oligarchy. It's the people with all the money. They run everything. The lobbyists with all the dough, they run everything. Those are the guys that are telling the politicians all the things to make. And when you start looking up the people that have all the money, that are in charge of all of these places, that are paying for all these lobbyists, 9 times out of 10, there's going to be a steen at the end of one of those names or a bird. And it's like, not being racist. Those dudes, Jews make money. They stay on top of everything, but they run all of the media. They run all of the news. They run everything. So they can put that spin on whatever they want to make Syria look horrible. I mean, I'm not saying that Syria is a bunch of lollipop kids rolling around handing people like Tootsie Rolls and stuff, but
right.
just for the United States to just be like, we're going to go annihilate them with zero proof, just like we did with the weapons of mass destruction. And I was all pro-Bush when we were going to Afghanistan the first time, but it's like there is no proof of any of this, and people are just running, and that's why you have so many uneducated Americans like, yeah, we should just flatten all of it, just turn Syria into Connarton. And you're like, yeah, that's genius. You have no idea what's happening over there.
Right.
But like, let's just condemn an entire country filled with people.
Well, I always say, too, follow the money, because war is a business. I mean, I believe that's the real reason that we went into Afghanistan, into Iraq, these countries that had nothing to do with 9/11. The people that Osama bin Laden recruited were from the Wahhabi tribe in Saudi Arabia. So according to the Bush administration, if we should have attacked anybody, it would have been Saudi Arabia. But obviously you can't do that.
You knew we weren't going after Saudi Arabia because we have all that oil that comes from those Saudi countries. Saudi Arabia's got one of the highest billionaires per capita. Like Abu Dhabi has the most billionaires per capita in the world. You think we're going after the richest people? No. You're going to go after a bunch of towelheads in the middle of nowhere with no money. And they don't barely have internet connection if they wanted to tell people what was really going on. They couldn't if they wanted to.
Right.
Like America paints them. It's the same thing. My grandfather, who was born in Italy, his father fought in World War I against the United States. He fought in World War II against the Italians. He was born in Italy. So, like, he used to say, there's one thing you'll never see, and like it's always like, it's been in my mind my whole life since I was probably 8, 9 years old. He said, you'll never see a translated speech from Hitler. And my grandfather was no, like, pro-Hitler, whatever. Like, he was an American. Like, he was at 24 years in the Army. Like, he was fought in World War II. He was an American. He was a patriot. But he said, you'll never see a translated speech from Hitler, because they're going to try to dehumanize Hitler as much as humanly possible. They're never going to put him in English because they don't want you to see what he's saying. You're going to have a bunch of gibberish in this angry-sounding language that you don't understand, and when you don't understand something, you instantly write it off being evil or bad or something that you don't comprehend. It's the same exact thing that they do with the Al-Qaeda and Afghanistanis and Iranians. They just stick them and they make them all sound hateful, and they're rolling around burning American flags, and we have this idea in our head because of this propaganda that's just shoved at us 24 hours a day from the media and from all these sources that just get to just shove stuff down your throat 24 hours a day, and it is just, it's propaganda, man. It's just propaganda.
I always call it, you've probably heard me say it, a corporatocracy. Use the term oligarchy, which I think is also very accurate. But yeah, it's all, and it's all becoming more and more concentrated too, as the wealth becomes more and more concentrated at the top. I think, and I'm no conspiracy theorist either, but I do think they're sort of onto something with this idea that it's a small number of people who control the world, in that it's becoming more, they're constantly consolidating power. That's why the top earners, the amount of people who have all the money continues to shrink as they amass more and more money. And I'm no class warfare guy. It's just the truth.
Yeah, dude, you know what Karl Marx said at the end of Das Kapital? Like, I'm not like some crazy, I'm an American, but like at the end of Das Kapital, Marx wrote that, he says, he used the analogy that if you're on a playground and you have a bunch of kids, right, and they all grow up together, and they're all growing up on the same playground, and you have one playground with these kids, and they're all fed the exact same amount, they're all given the exact same, they all grow up and they're all pretty much, they're all just as strong as each other, they're all right around the same size, they grew up with the same means as everyone else around them, so everyone around them is like the same strength. But then you have another playground where they were allowed that whoever was the strongest, whoever was making the most, whoever had the best connections, they were able to eat the most, they were able to gain the most wisdom and training and strength and stuff. And when it gets down to it, you're going to take a kid from that playground and match him up against the strongest of that other playground. And the people that are born and raised in a capitalist society, that was like the whole analogy, it's the whole capitalism, where it allows people to feed off of lesser people so that they are able to gain and become way bigger and way stronger and way overpowered, to the point where you're never going to be able to have someone that's like Russia, where they tried the whole everybody gets a fair amount, and then bring them toe-to-toe with somebody like where it boils down to you have 4 kids on the playground of 400 people, and they have all the money, all the power, all the jobs. They run everything. No one's going to be able to tell them what to do by the time they're I mean, they're 300 feet tall and made out of steel. They ate everything that everyone else was supposed to be eating, too. So now they're gigantic, and there's nobody anywhere can do about them because they were gigantic.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he almost condemned, well, not condemned, but he showed that in society, the way people work, communism is not going to work, and capitalism is just going to feed evil, which it did.
Right. Well, you know, they say capitalism is the best economic system in the world. I mean, the worst economic system in the world, except for all the others, I think is the expression.
That's a sad truth.
But you can't fix human nature, and I think that's the real problem. There is no system that truly works and is truly fair and equitable, because you'd have to somehow re-engineer our DNA to not be greedy.
People are always going to go with the flow of least resistance, whatever's the easiest. That's why, like, communism would be perfect, but it can never work because people are going to do as little as possible to get as much. That's how it's always been. That's how it is in the United States now. You added a little bit of the whole welfare and socialism aspect, and people started milking it. And now we just have a system that's run wild.
Well, we certainly need some reform in terms of how we pay for stuff.
That's.
David, you should call more often. What do you?
I know, man. I love this. I didn't even realize you're doing your own jam, man. You should.
Oh yeah. Are you usually around? You have a child now, right? Do you have one or two?
Yeah, I do.
You do, yeah. How's that going? How's being a dad?
Oh yeah, it's good. I mean, it's living.
Yeah.
It's another person.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Well, listen. We'll let you go because we're gonna open up the line for some more calls. But I'm glad you called.
All right, sweet.
And
dude, it was nice talking to you.
Yeah,
I'll have to give you guys a call soon. Talk to you next week or something.
Yeah, hit us up on Norman Friends if you want.
Hell yeah! All right, bro. Take it easy, man. Have a good day.
All right, David. Thank you.
Nice talking to you.
All right, bye-bye. So that was David Grover. It's interesting when David calls because you never know how it's going to go. Sometimes he'll get a little carried away and let one slip and whatnot. But sometimes when he's focused, he's a really smart guy.
He would have been good to have on last week. He's backed me up before in welfare debates with Norm and stuff. Oh yeah, no, he's laid into Norm before.
Oh really?
Oh yeah, yep. On Facebook, he's backed me up.
Well,
so.
I know he likes. I know he and Norm like to debate and whatnot. And we have a long and storied history with David Grover on Norm and Friends because I mean you've heard Norm tell the story 1,000 times, but when David would originally call, because we've known David now for years, when David would call, this was back when I first started doing Norm and Friends, so it was literally 5 years ago. It was very antagonistic between the two of them, and then they finally sort of bonded and came to an understanding. And a couple times we've had to hang up on David because he's called up and let one slip and sworn, which you can't do here on the air. But when David is focused, I mean, he is a smart guy. And I really enjoy talking to him. I know that he and the Amsterdam guys have a bit of a war going. I don't know the details of that. I just know that they don't like David. I'm not sure what happened exactly with that. Unlike the Tom Ford stuff, I'm not really sure what the backstory is with the David Grover stuff. But anyway, David, if you're still watching, I'm glad you called, and thank you. And I mean it when I say you should call more often, especially if I'm talking about religion, because you know your Bible better than most people I know. So we were talking about Jason Rapert. So I kind of gave you my rant about why I think people like Rapert are dangerous, because we don't elect them to represent God. We elect them to represent us. Here's the other part to this, though. It turns out... I want to make sure I have this. Oh, here we go. It turns out that when Jason Rapert, and this kind of goes with what David and I were kind of talking about who really runs things in this country. When Jason Rapert says he doesn't work for the constituents, he works for God, apparently when he says God, he doesn't literally mean God as in the deity. When Jason Rapert says God, he means the Koch brothers. Big surprise. This is from thenation.com. Lee Fang wrote this. It says, "Meet Jason Rapert, the Koch-backed evangelical steering Arkansas's radical abortion restriction effort." So let's get to know, because, I always say it on the show, right? When you elect people to send to Washington, or in this case, to the Arkansas State Legislature. You're not voting for someone to represent you. That's what we like to think. That's not the truth. You're voting for whatever set of lobbyists and special interest groups and fat cat donors and corporations and whomever else donates to that individual's campaign. That's who owns these people.
Can I just mention something about Arkansas?
Yeah.
I believe they're the state that very recently, I know it passed the Senate, I know about the House, but they're trying to ban certain tattoos.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
Yep, and it did pass the Senate, so that's Arkansas.
So much for the First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll read some of this to you. We'll get to know who Jason Rapert really works for, what he means when he says God.
Oh boy, story time.
Yes.
I like this.
On Wednesday, the Arkansas legislature lurched forward with a radical measure to ban most abortions if a fetal heartbeat is detected within 6 weeks of a pregnancy, a requirement experts say will force the state to insert a probe into a woman's vagina to detect. The bill also penalizes doctors who perform abortions. Okay, actually, well, no, we'll go with it. I was going to skip ahead, but there's not much here. So this will give you an idea of why Jason Rapert appeared in the news to begin with, and then it gets to the stuff about who he really works for when he talks about working for God. Okay, so the bill penalizes doctors who perform abortions after the date, carrying up to 6 years in prison and a fine up to $10,000. The chief sponsor of the measure is Republican State Senator Jason Rapert, a fiddle-playing financial planner. Doesn't the devil play a fiddle?
In Georgia.
Well, which is
Close.
the South.
Yeah.
Not quite Arkansas. Jason Rapert, a fiddle-playing financial planner with his own evangelical outreach center that hosts mission trips to Uganda, Ghana, and the Philippines. He has been among the loudest anti-abortion politicians in the state and has sponsored a number of other radical bills, including a very strange effort to organize a constitutional convention to give state legislatures power over the national debt limit. I have no idea how that would work. Here he is. Okay, then there's video of him. I can't play the video. We're not prepared for that, so I'll tell you what's in it. But there's a video on here of him at a Tea Party rally from 2011. Oh, by the way, the Tea Partiers are funded by the Koch brothers. Most people don't know that, or if you're a Tea Partier, you probably just willfully ignore it. But that's who owns your little grassroots effort. So you know. So there's video here of him at a Tea Party rally in 2011, not only complaining about Obama's Ramadan event, but also warning the president that his people have had enough of minorities running the country. And this is a quote of him speaking, "I hear you loud and clear, Barack Obama. You don't represent the country that I grew up with, and your, by the way, that's code for white people. You don't represent the country that I grew up with, and your values is not going to save us." I realize that's grammatically incorrect. I'm reading it exactly as he spoke it. "And your values is not going to save us. We're going to take this country back for the Lord. We're going to take this," because remember, God, we're God's favorites. "We're going to take this country back for conservatism, and we're not going to allow minorities to run roughshod over what you people believe in." That's Jason Rapert speaking. My impression of him. In another part of the same speech, Rapert proudly declares himself a birther and attacks the state Supreme Court for knocking down a ban on gay adoptions. Another example, apparently, of minority interests running roughshod over you and me. Right. Yes, because when you treat all people like human beings, that's minorities running roughshod over you and me. You know, us real Americans, white people. While Rapert certainly enjoys wide support in many corners of the evangelical movement, what interests me is how many white shoe corporations stepped in to support his candidacy last year. See, now, this is where we find out who he really works for. You know, because he works for God. But who is God in his mind? Who has the money to be God? This must be where that expression, you know, so-and-so has more money than God comes from. Because apparently God actually does have money, as we're about to find out. A look at his final campaign finance report reveals direct corporate dollars and corporate political action committees sponsored by companies not necessarily known for associating with the war on reproductive rights. Here are some examples. Southwestern Energy Company PAC gave $2,000. ARCH PAC of Arc Coal gave $1,000. Eli Lilly and Company gave $500. Lisa Allen, an executive with Cox Communications, gave $1,000. Nucor Corp PAC of AR gave of Arkansas gave $500. AT&T Arkansas PAC gave $2,000. Verizon gave $1,000. And American Electric Power PAC gave $500. In 2012, Arkansas was one of several states to become substantially more Republican, with both the state House and Senate falling into GOP hands for the first time since Reconstruction. Repair's district, a traditionally Democratic stronghold near Conway, was one of the pivotal seats that decided the balance of power. Repair made abortion a major issue in the campaign, attacking his opponent, State Representative Linda Tyler, for not doing enough to curtail abortion rights while serving as chair of the Arkansas House Public Health Committee. We might skip ahead here. Okay. Repair, a signatory to Koch's No Climate Tax Pledge, and a regular participant in AFP's political events, also received $2,000 directly from Koch Industries last year for his campaign. Perhaps business interests were drawn to Repair for his novel justifications for corporate-friendly legislation. Yes, corporate-friendly legislation. In other words, the people who donate the money get what they want. That's what that means. According to the Blue Arkansas blog, Repair defended his support for bringing high-interest payday lending back to the state by comparing such loans to the microfinance loans used to support third world farmers. Well, there's some twisted logic to support a predatory industry. Libertarian billionaire Charles Koch, author of his own ideology he touts as the science of liberty. By the way, I'm all for First Amendment rights, but I think it should be illegal for people like this to use the word science. It just seems wrong to me. It confuses people. He is famous for spreading his beliefs and his business interests through the aggressive use of political donations to candidates, think tanks, media outlets, universities, career training institutes, and dark money attack ad groups. By the way, those attack ads that these guys fund, where they take something about someone, a characteristic or something about their record, and deliberately distort it to make it look like they're just so evil. That's not very Christian. Just an observation. But critics, including myself, point to the hundreds of state and federal Koch-backed politicians who seem to prioritize fairly authoritarian policies. Repair's transvaginal probes and government-forced pregnancies do not seem to cohere with any nation of individual liberty I'm familiar with. So Repair, of course, just like the rest of them. And again, the little disclaimer that I find myself often giving, because I know some people think I just pick on Republicans with this stuff. I pick on Democrats too. A few weeks ago, I talked about Kirsten Gillibrand, a Democrat, as I call her, the other senator from New York, the one who's not Chuck Schumer. She was called out on a television program for, her biggest contributors are the big banks, J.P. Morgan Chase and Bank of America. They're her biggest contributors, and she was asked a direct question by John Oliver on The Daily Show. What do you have to do for that money? And, of course, she didn't answer the question. She answered a different question. So it's not just Republicans. But here's the thing. It's funny to me that it's always Republicans bringing up God, and yet here's an example with this guy, Jason Repair, of a guy or Rapert, however you say his name, who, when he says God, he really means the Koch brothers and all the others, all the other big money players. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, it doesn't matter that he says he serves God first and his constituents second. It doesn't matter, because to say that he serves either one is BS. None of these people serve their constituents. They serve wherever the money's coming from. Always follow the money. And Jason Repair, or Rapert, it's more fun to say Rapert, because, you know, these guys also, too, I'm surprised there's none of that in that video. These guys love to talk about rape in ways that are politically untenable for them, and they just don't seem to get it. I had another article pop up here. We're almost out of time, but there was something else about this guy, and I'm having a hard time getting to it now. It seems to have disappeared, but basically, there's an article from New York Magazine, and you can find it at nymag.com. And we're almost out of time anyway, so I'll give you the summation. Rapert was also probably at a similar rally in front of a bunch of Tea Partiers, because they tend to like this stuff. He was doing his, what I consider to be racist, his whole thing where talking about Obama as though he's a Muslim, and talking about how now we have Muslims in the White House. And, I mean, this is the kind of stuff he was saying. And I know that for a lot of right-wingers, it's kind of the cool thing to talk about Obama as though he is really this Kenyan-born Muslim terrorist who just any day now is going to sign an executive order declaring some new hybrid of communism and Sharia law for the United States. Now, I have plenty of my own criticisms of Barack Obama. I do. Because he is part of the problem in terms of the corporatocracy, and he's bought and paid for just like the rest of these politicians who operate at the federal level. He's no different in that regard. But Rapert, of course, talks about him like he's a Muslim, and he talks about the Muslims in the White House. And what's really funny is then he goes on and he talks about how, isn't it interesting that our president has what they call a Ramadan feast, which I guess is done annually at the White House. They have a Ramadan feast, and it's a Muslim-based thing. For those who don't know, Ramadan is a Muslim. It goes for a while. It's one of their traditions, one of their rituals. Like Christians have Christmas and Jews have Hanukkah. They have Ramadan, except I think it's for a long period of time, and they fast. And until I actually had some Muslim friends, I didn't even know what Ramadan was. I used to think Ramadan was that dude who used to fight Godzilla in all those movies, and then someone corrected me. But so he bashes Obama for that, saying, oh, he couldn't even be bothered to attend the national prayer breakfast, but he can have his Ramadan feast. And what's funny about the article is it then goes on to show pictures of George W. Bush and Bill Clinton and I think even Reagan. It goes back and shows all these pictures of previous presidents having, doing the Ramadan feast at the White House, because it's a freaking tradition. It's not something that started with our Muslim president, okay? They all do it. So by this idiot's logic, and all these people who have these weird conspiracy theories about the Muslim Obama, by that logic, all of our former presidents have been these secret Muslims who are just waiting to destroy the country from the inside, right? Because after all, they've all done the Ramadan feast. It's a tradition at the White House. It goes back several presidencies prior to Obama. And he flatly, just blatantly lies about how, but Obama can't go to the national prayer breakfast. Obama has attended all of the national prayer breakfasts that happen every year. So his mentioning that Obama couldn't even be bothered to go to that, which is code for Obama's not a real Christian, it's BS. He just flat out lies about that, or maybe he got his information from some right-wing website or whatever.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, I don't know a lot about, I do know what Ramadan was. I don't know a lot about the Muslim religion, but from what I understand is the terrorist, that's not really like what Muslim is about. And from what I understand, Muslims are actually a very peaceful, religion. Is Muslim the religion, or is it? Yeah.
Yeah, Islam.
Islamic.
They're Muslims,
But you're never gonna hear, like, if, say, you know, there's somebody that commits, like, murder or rape and they're a Christian, everyone's gonna be like, oh, all those Christians are a bunch of, like, rapists. But, like, as soon as you hear Muslim, everybody's like, oh, they're terrorists and stuff.
Yeah, well, some people, yeah.
And
some people.
it's you can't, like, generalize like that.
Yeah, but it's easier. It's just easier for people to generalize. That's why they do it. By the way, I have not been, it's funny, I start the show by reminding everyone that there's a chat room, and then I forget to pay attention to the chat room. Brooklyn Mike is in the chat room and says, hi guys, enjoying the show. And he says, don't worry, Matt, no matter what, I will never hate you. Thank you, Brooklyn Mike, and thank you for participating. I appreciate it. And also hi to Paxton88, who is, of course, Chris Rose, also in the chat room. So thanks, guys. So we're actually getting some chat room activity finally. So now that we're actually getting chat room activity during the show, going forward, I will remember to monitor it more closely. But thanks to everyone who watched today, and thanks again to David Grover for calling in. I really enjoyed that, and actually the insight that he gave in terms of where that whole idea that we're special in the eyes of God comes from. I did not know that, but David Grover does know his Bible. So next week, right here on the live television edition of Matt Connarton Unleashed, we'll be joined by George Lambert. Gary and I have had him a couple times on Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. He's a great guest. Really look forward to talking with him. I believe, I don't know if he's officially announced his candidacy, but he has an exploratory committee or something. I forget exactly what that's called. When you decide, you're working on deciding whether or not to decide to run for governor. So really looking forward to talking with George Lambert. And also don't forget the live radio edition of Matt Connarton Unleashed, Saturday nights at 11 p.m. Eastern on IPMNation.com. And, of course, Little Mel's show, No Boundaries, Monday nights at 10:30 Eastern, also on IPMNation.com. And we got to go, but come back. I'll be on Norman Friends at 4, and, of course, with Gary at 6. Inside Story is next. Do you have anything else really quick?
No.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you all later.